Hi everybody, you're listening to Comics and History, episode number 131, part 4, Spotlight on the Hal Jordan Spectre concluded. I mean it this time. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Brian J. Rygate, and class is back in session, and folks, this is it. I am wrapping up my look at the Hal Jordan Spectre with this recording. I just couldn't manage to squeeze it all in to a third part, so here you go. I forgot to review another story involving the Hal Jordan Spectre in my look at Hal Jordan's time in the role of the host. It's one which I spoke about when I talked about the post-crisis Supergirl. But when I was reviewing the story for that episode, of course, I was looking at it from the perspective of a Supergirl story. And, of course, it's very much a Supergirl story, but Hal Jordan's appearance in that story as the Spectre is something which I want to touch upon here too, because there are a couple of things that are significant in his appearance in that story. And the story is Many Happy Returns by writer Peter David with artist Ed Benes. Many Happy Returns was the final story arc for Peter David's run on the Supergirl title. This, of course, was the post-crisis Supergirl, who at this point was Linda Danvers. For a time, she had merged with the Matrix Supergirl, and through a whole rigmarole of events, Linda Danvers ended up becoming Supergirl on her own. And so with this final story arc, David was bringing that incarnation of Supergirl's story to a close. And it's a really neat one. Linda Danvers returns from space. She comes home to Leesburg. Her powers have been newly restored, and she's just catching up with her parents when an alien spacecraft lands in Leesburg. And so she switches to Supergirl, goes to crash site, and it's a Kryptonian ship, a different sort of Kryptonian ship, and out pops about 15-year-old girl wearing a variation of Superman's costume. And looking at the costume design, it's the pre-crisis Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, just arriving on Earth. And so after some investigation, Linda Danvers learns that Kara Zor-El is indeed a genuine item. But then, after she takes the young Kara in and is showing her the ropes, so to speak, the Spectre, who at this time is hosted by Hal Jordan, appears with an important revelation, which he shares with both Linda and Kara. He explains that Kara is actually from a previous reality which has been replaced by the current one. And he explains that in the prior reality, this Kara Zor-El died heroically, saving her cousin Superman, as well as, one could say, the entire universe, or what was left of the multiverse at that time. And Hal, as the Spectre, explains that Kara needs to go back to her reality. There is a force which caused her to cross realities and come into the post-crisis reality, but for sake of survival of all of reality, Kara has to go back. And it's telling that the Spectre reveals all of this in Kara's presence. It goes to show that for all Hal may be a caring person himself, the Spectre clearly doesn't have quite that bedside manner. And so, of course, the young Kara is terrified. So, Spectre pushes off for other duties to perform, and Linda pulls a sneaky one. She gets into Kara's ship and crosses over into the pre-crisis reality, leaving Kara in the post-crisis reality to presumably become the Supergirl of the post-crisis reality. Meanwhile, we see on the pre-crisis reality, Linda does her able best to establish herself as quote-unquote Kara Zor-El from Krypton, and Superman goes along with this for a while until he comes clean to Linda and says, look, you're not my cousin. You're clearly somebody very special, and hey, guess what? I've got the hots for you. So the two of them fall in love, get married, and they have a daughter named Ariella. And they're happy for a few years, but then the crisis, of course, breaks out, and one day the Spectre makes a return appearance and really not just lambasts, but lashes out at Linda. He's extremely enraged with her, and he tells her that she cannot replace Kara. She's got to undo this, and he will help pull off the switcheroo, and of course he'll erase everybody's memories of what's happened in this changed timeline, such that nobody ever remembers that Linda Danvers was a Supergirl of the pre-crisis Earth 1, and Kara will come to the pre-crisis reality, and she won't remember having been told that she is destined to die during this great cosmic crisis. But the Spectre agrees to one demand from Linda. Hers and Clark's daughter, Ariella, must be allowed to keep on living. And the Spectre agrees to this, and so he takes Ariella and transplants her in the post-crisis reality, but he takes her to the 853rd century, i.e. the DC 1 million time. And so the story ends with Linda back to her status quo, but not for long. She leaves letters for Lois and Clark, as well as for her parents, saying that she basically has to leave and she has to go find herself. Now, what's important about this from the perspective of the Spectre? Well, it just goes to show that the Spectre is this great all-knowing being who can see across multiple realities, even if they're realities that are considered dead or are no longer remembered. And it's nice for the fans who felt that in the years after Crisis on Infinite Earths, there were moves by creators and fans alike to say, well, the pre-crisis reality never happened. It's not in canon anymore. But seeing the Hal Jordan Spectre's words here, yes, the crisis as it was originally portrayed by Wolfman and Perez actually did take place. And it does still matter for the sake of continuity of the post-crisis reality. So really neat to see that the Spectre is able to see into this, and one would say other realities going back as far as the Golden Age. With what's going on in Doomsday Clock, one has to wonder whether the Spectre is aware of the whole concept of the metaverse. Now, looking at the time period when this story came out, this came out between late 2002, early 2003, and looking at Hal's appearance when he shows up at Linda's home in the pre-crisis reality, clearly shows us that at this point Hal's beginning to succumb to the encroaching influence of Parallax, an early sign that serving as the host for the Spectre, was not able to keep Parallax at bay, and that Parallax was in fact biding its time, playing its cards, and slowly influencing Hal in his role as the host of the Spectre. I don't think that this is inconsistent writing on Peter David's part. It actually makes the whole journey of Hal from Parallax to the Spectre back to Green Lantern feel organic, in that we can say that here Hal is struggling to keep the Spectre's vengeance at bay, and it's telling that he has this moment of clarity where Linda presents this demand, don't let my child die, and he agrees to that. So it still shows that even though Parallax was reaching out even further, trying to latch on to Hal's soul, and in that way grab a hold of the Spectre, Hal was still fighting back. And given that he wanted to be this agent of, or the spirit rather, of redemption, that he was going to accept this appeal and not let a life be lost. It also ties in with the fact that during the J.M. DeMatteis run on the Spectre, or Hal was an uncle. So of course he would be thinking about his little girl, Helen, when listening to Linda say, please don't let my daughter be erased from continuity. So I just wanted to mention that before jumping back into talking about the wrap-up to Green Lantern Rebirth. So of course, after Hal is able to find the will to separate himself from Parallax, and thus from the Spectre as well, the Spectre basically ditches everybody, heads back, presumably to meet the Voice or the Presence and await further assignment. And then through the rest of the narrative, Hal, who's newly resurrected and restored as a Green Lantern, along with the other human Green Lanterns, as well as Kilowog, are able to stop Parallax, imprison him, put him in the central power battery, where the Guardians have been restored to their aged, sage selves, basically setting up for a whole return to the pre-Zero Hour, or even pre-Zero Hour, one would say immediate post-crisis status quo for Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. And so in the final couple of pages, there's a nice dialogue between Hal and Carol asks Hal how much he remembers about his time as the Spectre, and he explains to her that the memories are quickly fading. No doubt he'll retain the knowledge that he was dead and that he was the host for the Spectre. However, the accumulated knowledge that he had access to during his time as the Spectre is quickly fading. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, given what Jeff Johns was aiming for at the start of his Green Lantern run, think of what Mr. Johns was saying in different interviews at the launch for the next volume of Green Lantern. Hal was being returned to his roots as the young, hotshot, confident man of action who might possibly jump into the fray at times without asking questions or knowing everything that was going on. Certainly Mr. Johns was also interested in establishing Hal as a Chuck Yeager type of character. And so to have an all-knowing Hal Jordan would really take away from what Johns was trying to do with Hal's characterization in returning him to his roots. Plus, given that Infinite Crisis was pretty well around the corner at that point. Fans didn't have to wait too long to receive a new Spectre.